All right, looks like everyone has joined us. My name is Andrew Ridgie. I am the executive director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We are a not-for-profit association representing thousands of bars and restaurants and nightclubs across the five boroughs. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning for this important webinar. We're fortunate to be joined by the Department of Sanitation, the Foodprint Group, and the New York City Mayor's Office for Food Policy. I've worked on this commercial zone change for years when it was initially just a concept. And it's incredible to see now this new policy is being implemented. Many people used to call the carting industry kind of the Wild West. There was something like 90 commercial waste haulers across the city, and certain neighborhoods would actually get served by about 50 different carters crisscrossing the city. So you could understand the challenges when it comes to pollution, street safety, and all the different impacts. And for the purpose of our conversation, small businesses like bars, restaurants, and nightclubs that the Hospitality Alliance represents. And of course, with that comes changes that you all need to understand as business owners when it comes to hauling and your commercial waste. So you're going to hear a lot today. The format is going to be a short presentation from three of the different folks on the call. I will then follow up after each of their presentations with a couple of really popular questions that people are asking, and then we'll go to the next presenter. After that process happens three times, depending on timing, we will leave an open forum for additional Q&As. But if you do have questions along the way, there is a Q&A feature you should see in the chat. Please drop your questions in there. We'll have a team reviewing them. We'll get to as many of those additional questions at the end. If we don't get to all of them by 11:30, we will do our best to respond separately with all of them. As well, we will make this presentation available as it's being recorded, so you can always reference back to it. So with that, thanks again for joining us. I'm first going to turn it over to Tahina Ghosh, who's the operations lead at the Bureau of Commercial Waste at the city's Department of Sanitation, to talk about commercial waste zones and what it means for food and hospitality businesses. Tahina, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. Much appreciated. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here to hear a little bit more about commercial waste zones and how it applies to you and the businesses that you serve. We can go on to the next slide. So first, we're going to talk about just the scale of the commercial waste system in New York City. Every day, over 250,000 businesses generate over 9,000 tons of waste, which is about 18 million pounds. This is equivalent to roughly 2.5 times the amount of concrete that's used to construct the Empire State Building. And all of that only accounts for about half of the total waste generated in New York, the other half coming from residential sources and public institutions. Next. Previously, before commercial waste zones came along, the system was unstructured and there was no standardized framework for service. If you look at the map of the five boroughs on the right, you'll see it is broken up by community districts, and the number inside represents how many private hauling companies service business waste in that area. So you can see, as Andrew mentioned before, that in the more dense commercial districts and corridors and areas like parts of Manhattan, parts of northwestern Brooklyn, there could be up to 50 or more companies traversing those areas, usually at night, collecting business garbage, whereas places like Staten Island or northeastern Queens, you'll see where there's a lower density of businesses, more residential areas. It could be 15 to 25 or so companies servicing the area. What this means is that the system was very chaotic Routes were overlapping, truck routes, and sometimes these drivers were having to drive 12-hour shifts, traversing very circuitous routes, going through multiple boroughs just to pick up a few customers. So this created a lot of roadway wear and tear at night. It was very noisy. Sometimes these drivers had to violate traffic rules in order to pick up their customers in time. So it was the Wild West, as Andrew mentioned before. Next slide. So after a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of modeling and analysis, in November of 2019, Local Law 199 was signed, which transitioned the city to commercial waste zones to the program, which divides the city into 20 zones where private carters bid to provide service in specific zones. At the end of the request for proposals process, the city grants awards such that each zone will have up to 3 carters who must provide high quality, competitively priced curbside service. In addition to the curbside service, up to 5 private hauling companies will be authorized to provide service at loading docks for large containers, which are defined as 10 plus cubic yard 10 or more cubic yard dumpsters and compactors. Next slide. This is the final model that was decided upon after many different trial runs. This is the 20 zone model. You can see that the zones were drawn for the most part along community district boundaries, and the zones were drawn such that each zone would have a similar number of businesses within it. So the first zone that rolled out at the beginning of 2025 was Queens Central, followed by the entirety of the Bronx, followed by Brooklyn South and Queens Northeast, then followed by Lower Manhattan, and currently we're in phase 5. We have begun on July 1st rolling out Staten Island and Midtown South. As you can see, for example, Staten Island, which is a more residential area with some business corridors, but not a huge density. All 3 community districts make up one zone that rolls out together, whereas Midtown South, also shown here in purple, is a much smaller geographic area, but it is extremely dense as far as businesses. So that's why it is a much smaller area. Next. What are some of the benefits of commercial waste zones? The competitive bidding between carters during the RFP process was designed to prevent overpricing of their customers, which are the businesses. Also, transparency of pricing for the businesses. In the past, some of the larger businesses that have more negotiating power saw better rates than the small mom and pops in the same neighborhood. And also, a lot of the contracts were oral contracts, not written. So therefore, the transparency now, all contracts will be written contracts. Also, for the first time in the history of commercial waste in New York City, businesses are incentivized to recycle and separate organics. This is through the requirement that carters must charge a lower rate for recycling and organics collection than trash collection. In addition, carters must adhere to stricter customer service standards, increase standardized training and annual retraining for their employees, and much stricter safety standards, including things like the side guards on trucks, and cameras and mirrors and all kinds of things. For the carters, the benefits are greater operational efficiency as far as having all their customers in a much denser, smaller geographical area, easier to manage, less VMT, vehicles miles traveled, and also a more predictable revenue stream because these contracts between the city and the carters are 10 years long. For the residents of these busy commercial districts, what it means is much safer streets, quieter nights, improved air quality because the fleet is much cleaner. That's a requirement, the fleet of trucks. And as a city, we are hoping to move towards the zero waste goals with higher diversion rates for business, recycling, and organics. Next. This program is rolling out in 10 phases. It will be completed by the end of 2027. You can go to our website to get any and all information about commercial waste zones at nyc.gov/CWZ. You will also there be able to see the latest rollout timeline by zone. Next. So for any zone, the implementation period is 2 months ahead of what we call day one of zone launch. So all contracts between carters and businesses must be signed by the zone launch day one. If a business does not sign a CWZ contract effective day one, they will be assigned a carter at the maximum allowable rate, which was decided during the RFP process between the city and the carter, and the minimum allowable pickup frequency, which um, is a legal requirement. Uh, the assigning of the carter is a legal requirement, and the minimum allowable pickup frequency is 2 times a week garbage and 1 time a week recycling. And if a business separates organics, 1 time a week organic separation. So, what does this mean? Let's say for the 2 zones that are currently rolling out, the sign up period for businesses started July 1st, and after 2 months, the sign up period ends on August 31st. And September 1st is going to be what we call the zone launch day. So if businesses have not signed and negotiated a contract on their own, DSNY, as legally required to, will assign a carter to them. Next. What are the 5 easy steps to comply? Number 1 is evaluate your waste to determine your specific unique service needs. Number 2, go to our online tool. It's called Find Your Zone. And you can identify the zone associated with your address and which are the carters authorized to service it. Number 3 is compare maximum prices the carters can charge you using our other online tool, which is called the Maximum Price Calculator tool. Number 4, is probably the most important one, is negotiate and obtain multiple quotes from the different carters. Number 5, review the written agreement very carefully and make sure it reflects the terms of your agreement, and sign this new written agreement for trash and recycling. If a business doesn't produce or generate any recycling in a given billing period, they simply will not be billed for it, but the written agreement must include garbage and recycling. At any time, a business can request a review of the invoice with the carter. Next. Finally, after you've signed a contract with an authorized carter, they will send you a green and white decal like the one shown here. It will be completed by the carter, and you must display this decal in your establishment's door or window near the principal entrance where it is visible from the sidewalk. If there is no such place to put the decal, then please keep it either at your service entrance or on hand in case an enforcement agent were to stop by. Next. Some property owners contract with an authorized carter on behalf of all the businesses in the building. If this applies to you, confirm with your property owner or building manager that you're included on the building's waste contract. You do not need to sign a separate contract if you're covered, but it is on the business to confirm coverage. If the business is not included and has not signed their own agreement, then DSNY will assign a carter. Next. Some other resources that we provide here at the Bureau of Commercial Waste, including video webinars like this, are educational site visits, group trainings, tabling events, speaking engagements, and phone consultations. You can request these free resources anytime at nyc.gov/CWZ contact. That is our web form. Next. We also have online multiple materials that are available to download and print in multiple languages. And that link is nyc.gov/DSNY commercial resources. Some things that you can download and print are official notices about recycling rules, organics rules, foam ban, skip the stuff. And also there's sample signs and labels for any place that waste is collected in at your business. Next. If you
Great.
have,
Oh,
yep,
sorry, go ahead.
no problem. If you have any further questions, you can always go to nyc.gov, commercial waste. And if you have any specific inquiries or questions for our team, you can go to nyc.gov/CWZ contact. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tina. I actually have two quick questions before we turn it over to Christina. The first one, I
Mhm.
believe there are some recent changes regarding how and when businesses put out their waste for collection. If you could just touch on that quickly, and then also which businesses are currently required to separate their organics, and yeah, I'll leave it at those two.
Yep. These are great questions, and we get asked this all the time. So the new set out rules for business waste, they were phased in completely by 2024, and it requires all trash and organics to be set out in bins with tightly fitted lids. So no more black bags of business waste placed directly on the curb, and these bins must be placed out after 8 p.m., which is 4 hours later than what it used to be, which was 4 p.m. for set out. Um, if a business closes before 8 p.m., then they can set out their bins before within 1 hour of the closing time. For recycling, it's almost exactly the same, but if you are setting out your recycling after 8 p.m., then you have the option of either bins or clear plastic bags for the recycling. And boxes have to be flattened and they can just be bundled and placed out next to the bins and clear plastic bags.
Great.
And
Thank you.
your other question was about,
Organics.
yes.
Yeah, who's
So
required to separate organics currently?
yeah, the organics requirements apply to food service establishments that are 7,000 square feet or greater in gross floor area. And before I even go into all of that, the organics requirement is for separation of organics that is staff handled. So back of house organics. That's a distinction I want to make. So it's FSEs that by themselves are over 7,000 square feet in floor area, or if they have multiple locations, then over 8,000 square feet combined floor area. Similarly, there's a requirement for grocery stores. There's a requirement for large stadiums and arenas, which is 15,000 seats. There's requirements for manufacturing, wholesale, um, what am I thinking? Food prep establishments. It's a pretty long list of
Great.
requirements, and anyone can go to nyc.gov commercial organics to see exactly where they fall in that criteria. But as
And I believe we just popped that link into the chat as well for easy access. Can I
yes,
ask you one quick follow-up question? That I want to
yeah,
go to Christina, was just
yeah.
a distinction that you made. I think it was
Mhm.
clear, but just to confirm. So you said the organics separation is just for back of the house. So in the
Correct.
kitchen, restaurants
Mhm.
need to separate the organics, but the customers, if it's like a limited service restaurant, they do not need to separate their organics.
Correct. And that that thought process is mostly because of contamination. The there's a lot less control over what customers are throwing into the organics bin, if anything. So for to keep it a little bit um, to keep the stream a little more pristine, it is easier to tell your employees this is what we're going to separate back of house. It's a little harder to manage what's being
And what
separated
about
in
in a
customer
full service
areas.
restaurant, a busser that clears a table and brings the food into the back of house? That needs to
Yes,
be separated.
yes, that needs to be
Great.
separated. Mhm.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tuhina. As I said earlier, if anyone has specific questions that weren't answered, you can drop them in the chat and we'll try to answer them at the end or follow up with you after the presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Christina Grace, who is the CEO and founder of Foodprint Group. Christina, floor is
Thank
yours.
thank you so much, Andrew. Hey, everyone. It is so good to be here, and we are so pleased to be able to host this webinar because the topic is so important and it is way, way sexier than it sounds. So at Foodprint, we are a zero waste partner to hospitality businesses. We provide design and operations, technical assistance. We have a fabulous e-learning platform for self-starters who want to make their own tools like signage and SOPs called Foodprint U. And we have Foodprint Tracks, which is our app for daily waste tracking and reporting. Today, I am going to talk mostly about waste tracking and the power of data, how it's mission critical as you negotiate your new commercial waste zone hauler contracts. As you heard from Tahina, recycling is significantly less expensive than trash to haul, and now in every district, at least one waste hauler must charge less for organics than trash. And we are seeing, for the most part, that in order to be competitive, haulers are actually all falling in line and doing better with their organics pricing. So it's super exciting. And, tracking waste is something that, we live and breathe it. It sounds like a lot more work than it really is. Our customers are tracking waste every day using our Foodprint Tracks app. There are other tools out there. You can track waste in a spreadsheet, but the message I want to leave everybody with today is that you need to be tracking your waste. We'd love to see you do it daily. If you're not going to do it daily, try to do it monthly or quarterly. And you can do simple things like unit weight audits, where when you're staging waste at the curb, you are just counting and intermittently you are weighing those units so that you have a sense of your waste. Because what I'm going to talk about today is how, when you know what your waste is, you can actually really understand, when you look at that waste hauler bill, if you are being charged appropriately for the materials you are actually generating. And as you're negotiating these new contracts, it's going to be super important that not only are you capturing the new cost savings for organics that are included in this, but that you're actually getting to a place where you are negotiating contracts based on your specific waste generation, how much trash, how much recycling, and how much organic waste you have. So you can monitor that every day. You can do basic waste audits. You can really go deep with tools like Winnow or LeanPath and actually track your food waste, because food is your largest waste stream. But I'm going to walk through some recent analysis that we've done with clients to verify their current waste spills align with their actual waste, and then to estimate the new costs using DSNY's commercial waste zone rate calculator. Now, for this analysis, we've been using Trax data. And I want to be very clear that most of our clients are not weighing every pound of waste they generate every day. They're tracking by units, as I discussed earlier. They're tracking by bags, and they're weighing a bunch of bags and getting an average unit weight. And then every day, they're tracking how many trash bags they have, how many organics bags or how many organics totes they have, and their fill rates and weights, and how many recycling bags and how many cardboard bales and so on. So the data is not perfect, but it's really, really good. And so when we took that data for one of our clients, who's a luxury hotel that has one very vibrant F&B venue, most of a hotel's waste is coming from their food and beverage when they have those programs in place. And we looked at that, and based on their waste hauler bills and their compared to their tracks data, there was a giant discrepancy. You can see that the total weight is overstated by about 83%. Trash is overstated by about 545%. And so I'm showing you this, and this is honestly one of the most extreme examples of where there's the discrepancy between what you're being charged for and what you're generating. But that's sort of to get you guys to go, oh, and actually pull out some hauling bills and take a look at them. So in this case, if the client is being charged for their appropriate actual waste under the new commercial waste zones, they're saving about $21,000 a year in waste hauling cost. And that is not chump change for a business. So it's completely worth really diving in. And in this example, we're just looking at, this is what you're generating today, and this is what the pricing would look like. We're going to also talk about, well, if you actually did a little better with your waste diversion and you were recycling more and composting more, what does that actually mean for your bills too? So in this case, a client is a bakery and cafe space. We took a look at their bills, and the hauler was doing really well with estimating their actual recycling, but they were way, way, way over in trash and way, way over in organics. And we're not looking, when we're talking about comparing to tracks data, our clients are tracking their waste every day, and we're looking at averages over a 12-month period. So we capture those big jumps that you have when you have special events or different seasonal things in a way that sometimes when you're just doing a spot audit, you're getting just one day to look at. And often that's what a hauler is doing. At the start of a contract, a hauler is supposed to be doing a pretty quick unit weight audit to estimate your waste. And then what they're doing is they're taking that estimate and often just billing you the same thing every month, unless there are extra charges. So if you have organics and there needs to be an extra tote, they're adding to that. If you have containerized waste and there's bags that overflow, they may be charging you extra for that. But for the most part, your bills look awfully the same, even though you could be taking on, you could be eliminating a product. You could be changing your purchasing and eliminating single-use cups, and they're no longer going into the trash and recycling. And you could be making these changes, but your bill stays the same. And that should not be the case, because the whole point in this kind of pricing is to create incentives for you to divert more, to have better climate impacts over time. So now that we can really marry the cost savings with the environmental benefits under the commercial waste zones, we want to see you doing more. So in this case, you're looking at $31,000 really in potential savings with the new commercial waste pricing and accurate accounting for this is how much the actual waste generation is. And finally, we've got the third case. This is another hotel. This has 4 F&B venues. And so it's large. And we're looking at, we took a look across the in the calculator, you'll see all of the haulers that are zoned for your district, and you can look at all of their max pricing. And we looked at, okay, their current pricing is way, way off. You can see the hauler is reporting 10% diversion. They're actually diverting 75%. And then we said, well, you know, we really want to get you to 90%. What if you actually improve your recycling and your composting? And we have plenty of hotel clients that are in the 90% waste diversion zone. So this is not unrealistic. And then we looked at what that savings could be. And reaching 90% diversion over their 75% would actually save them significant amount of money as well. So anywhere between $1,390 and $1,827 a month. So again, that was just that going from 75 to 90%. So it's important to be really, really digging into this data. We're going to talk later in the session about diversion levers. So how do you do better? But I'm just tossing some things in here. If you're actually, proper separation really is so dependent on design first, because waste is a design problem. It's a problem in design of the stuff that you're buying that can only be trashed or is confusing and hard to recycle, and the design of your spaces that make it hard for people to know where to put what. So we're going to be talking a little bit about best practices, signage, color-coded bins, labels, things that the city requires, and a little bit about purchasing, and how some quick changes could really make all the difference. And I just toss a slide in. You'll have access to these slides later, where you can make small changes like using less gloves in your process. You need to meet the Department of Health requirements, but there are lots of things that happen in a kitchen that don't require gloves. And we had a client remove 96,000 gloves from their purchasing in a year. That's not small, by just using gloves only when necessary. We had a client replace plastic tasting spoons and compostable tasting spoons with stainless steel. These can be washed, used over and over again in the kitchen. Super easy change, and they saved $4,500. So little things like that. We can talk a little bit more about this later, because I want to get the show on the road to Aura so we can have a really vibrant discussion at the end. But we're providing some quick next steps for you. Start tracking your waste, audit your hauler bill against your own data, use those DSNY resources to look at those hauler pricings for the commercial waste zone, and be ready with ammo when you go into those negotiations. And really look at your purchasing and try to identify some opportunities to remove the things that cause a lot of contamination or can only go in the trash, and make some changes. We will provide a whole set of links to resources at the end of this, and I'm going to toss it back to Andrew so that, like I said, we can keep the show on the road.
Thank you, Christina. That was great. Very insightful. I like those kind of practical examples. Are always really happy about how other restaurants and hotels are actually, saving money and what they're doing. So I will turn it over to Aura Kemp. Aura is the Senior Policy Advisor at the New York City Mayor's Office of Food Policy. Aura will go over a couple other items. I may have a couple questions, and then I'm going to ask a few questions of the three of our presenters. And like I said, if you have additional questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them on today's presentation. Otherwise, we will follow up, or you could certainly find many of the answers in the various links that are currently in the chat feature. Aura, take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Andrew. Hi, y'all. My name is Aura, and I'm here to talk a little bit more about the policy structures in place that are helping to guide both the expansion of the commercial waste zones and a deeper understanding of the protections that are already in place in our policies. We'll go through some of the current food donation policies before going into some of the pending donation policies and exploring opportunities to find a donation partner to support in that diversion effort. Next slide, please. So we'll start off by talking about the current food donation policies, both at the federal level, the state level, and of course on our local and city level. Next slide. The overarching federal policy that we have in place is the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, and this is part of the expanded protections under the Federal Food Donation Improvement Act. And this provides a federal baseline protection for all food donors against state and federal liability claims. And this includes individuals, businesses and schools, nonprofit organizations, officers of businesses and nonprofits, and gleaners that provide donations in good faith to either nonprofit organization that distribute food that is donated to communities, or donations directly to individuals in need. And that donated food must meet all quality and labeling standards that are imposed by federal, state, and local laws and regulations. And this can include both ingredient donation or prepared meal donations. I'm also going to include in the chat a link to the Q&A document for the Good Samaritan Act to give a little bit of additional insight around the protections that are included underneath that federal policy and what it means for your business if you're interested in donating and diverting any surplus food. Next slide, please. Getting into more of our state and city policies, we'll start with the state and work our way down. The New York State Tax Incentive Law, so New York State Tax Law 210B52, provides protections and states that farmers are eligible for tax credits of up to 25% of fair market value for qualified donations up to $5,000 annually. For wholesome food that meets all of the quality and labeling standards to New York food banks, pantries, or other emergency food programs. And the federal government provides tax deductions to incentivize businesses to donate this food. And as of December 2015, all businesses, including C Corps, S Corps, limited liability corporations, partnerships, and sole proprietorships are eligible for enhanced tax deductions. And for any of the food that's donated that meets certain requirements. So again, those quality and labeling standards. And if they don't meet those requirements, they can still claim the general tax deduction as part of the protections underneath the federal law. I'm also going to include in the chat a link to the food donation and food scraps recycling law guidance document for New York State businesses. This is a very long and robust document, but it's really informative to understand all of the protections that exist for different business configurations, as well as what can and cannot be diverted or donated. For New York State organics waste recycling laws, these are covered underneath the New York environmental conservation laws, and this includes 27-2201 through 27-2219. For these, entities generating more than 2 tons per week of food waste must donate excess edible food to the maximum extent practical. And this recycling, this includes recycling all remaining food scraps within 25 miles of an organic recycler. And starting in January 1st of 2027, so coming in this next year, this threshold is actually going to lower. It's going to come down to 0.5 ton per week generated within a 50-mile radius as the new requirement. A really important note about this state policy for New York City, there are exemptions that exist within the state policy for New York City because of our independent organic waste and recycling ordinance. What this means is, while the rest of the state and businesses that might operate both in New York City and outside of New York City, but still within New York State, you are required to follow these policies on a state level, but New York City has specific carve-outs because of our municipal organics ordinance, which we'll get into next. For New York City's municipal organic ordinance is underneath the Administrative Code 16-3061. And this includes also the New York City Administrative Code 16-308.1, in which it states entities, including food service establishments and hotels, stadiums, manufacturers, food wholesalers, chain establishments, food preparation establishments, caterers, food retailers, and chains and sponsors of public events must separate the organic material and either send it to a composting, anaerobic digestion, or other processing facilities, or they're required to process it on site. And as of October 7th, 2024, all New York City residents are required to source separate their food waste for curbside organics collection. So this is not something that we're just asking of businesses to adopt, but it's really looking at the continuum of current organics, the opportunities for diversion and separation, and encouraging both retailers and community members to do their part to source separate for better management of our organics waste. Next slide, please. There are some additional pending state policies that are also being advanced that we'll go through a little bit here. I'm sharing these with you guys because if implemented, they will impact your businesses. And these are opportunities also for advocacy because it's meant to support diversion efforts. So the New York State Food Rescue Tax Credit included in the Assembly Bill 9329 and Senate Bill 8878 would create a refundable and transferable tax credit for businesses that donate ingredients to community-based organizations like food pantries. So when we talk about donation, there's kind of like the large scale or large volume donation, and then there's also like prepped ingredients specific to like restaurants when you're doing meal prep. If you have surplus at the end of a service, what can be done around donation for those items? For the large scale, so whole item or whole ingredient, large volume donations, the New York State Food Rescue Tax Credit would support in providing a $75 million annual fund that provides credits so that 65% of the fair market value would go towards qualified food donations, 100% of documented transportation and storage expenses directly attributable to the donations would be covered, and credits are refundable and transferable. If you could just go back one slide, please. Thank you so much. For the ingredient donation for meals and donation policies related to prepped ingredients, this is especially important for things like restaurants or kitchens where you're doing meal preparation and food preparation. If there are additional items at the end of the day, this could potentially be covered underneath the Chef to Community tax credit, represented under Assembly Bill 9055 and Senate Bill 8719. These create a tax credit for food service establishments that donate prepared meals or ingredients to community-based organizations like food pantries. And this would cover 50% of each of the donated meals, market value being reimbursed up to $7 per meal. This also has an annual cap of $10,000 per business, but if enacted, it would take effect beginning in the 2027 tax year. This was unfortunately not included in the final budget at the state level, but is continuing to be advocated for at the state level to support an adoption of those tax credits. One thing that is local, hyper local, that I also want to make folks aware of is the New York City Council Intro 31. This expands the categories of establishments that would be designated by the Department of Sanitation that's subject to requirements regarding separation and disposal of organic waste. And it requires that DSNY designate additional covered establishments by December 1st of 2026. And any designated establishment would be required to comply with the commercial waste zone effective dates, which is why we're here talking about this today. The bill would also require that commercial waste zone haulers, so those contracted vendors for hauling your surplus, for hauling your organic waste, would have to provide information on the donation of excess edible food to any establishment receiving organic waste collection. So this is going to be a collective effort, both on behalf of the retail and business partner and on the hauler, to ensure that everybody is well informed on the opportunities for diversion. This intro has passed both committee and council here in New York City, and it's currently awaiting approval by Mayor Mamdani. So we can anticipate that that would be going into effect this year. Next slide, please. When it comes to finding a donation partner, again, we kind of look at this in two different pillars. There's a large volume donation partners and then ingredient and meal donation partners. Next slide. So for finding a donation partner, there are a few platforms in which the generator, so each of our retailers that have surplus, you would determine what your specific needs are for your diversion partner and then consider the different types and volumes of edible items that you would need to divert. For large volume donation partners, there are organizations like City Harvest, Sharing Access, and the Roundtable Partner Network, which would be able to both pick up, transport, store, and distribute large scale or large volume donation. This is when you're looking at things like pallets of food or large volumes over 100 pounds. There are also additional technology platforms that will match surplus food generators, so businesses that have large scale volumes of food to donate, to organizations that are in need of surplus food. And they'll also support with things like transportation, connecting businesses directly to those donation recipients, and other logistics associated with diverting surplus food. Those include things like Food Stream Network, Move for Hunger, foodrecovery.org, and Gooder. For ingredient and meal partners, these are organizations that can receive prepped ingredients and prepped meals for the purposes of delivery directly to community members in need. So these include organizations like Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, Rethink Food, soup kitchens that are partnered throughout the Community Food Connection Network, which is the Department of Social Services Emergency Food Network, and Grassroots Grocery, which supports with things like community distributions and community fridge stocking, so prepared meals that could go directly to community members. There are also applications that will sell surplus food. So if you are a business that, if you're a restaurant, for example, and you have additional meals at the end of the day and you don't want them to go to waste, you can actually package them up and put them onto a platform like Too Good To Go, which will then reimburse you for partial cost of that food. Not the same as the retail or market rate that you would get, but it does allow you to still recoup some of the cost for that surplus food while providing meals to people at a discounted cost. Next slide. I wanted to just also note, although it's not included in the deck here, there were some questions around skip the stuff. And just to give a little bit of context, as of July 31st, 2023, the New York City food service establishments and third-party food delivery apps and couriers cannot provide items like utensils, condiment packets, napkins, and extra containers and takeout or delivery orders unless customers specifically request them. And this was to support in helping to reduce the amount of additional materials waste that we were seeing going into our waste stream that were not being utilized. So the restrictions apply for online ordering and delivery apps that your establishment might use. And the restrictions do not apply to things like self-service stations, condiments created and sealed by the food service establishment yourself. So if you make your own sauces and include those, or utensils, condiments, and napkins, and eating containers that are ordered for dining on premises of the food service establishment. The laws associated with this are enforced by the Department of Sanitation and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protections. There has to be visual signs and displays to inform customers of these new restrictions. So something stating utensils, condiments, napkins, and extra plates are only available upon request for delivery or takeout is sufficient. And enforcement for this started in July of 2024, and businesses can receive a violation for non-compliance. So making sure that those are being integrated. Fines can be $50 for the first offense, $150 for the second, and $250 for the third and subsequent offenses. And businesses should absolutely be prepared for visits and inspections, because this is also something that will be looked at during that process. And there's also an opportunity for folks to contact 311 for non-compliance. So just putting that on the radar for folks as well. I'll go ahead and pause in case anyone has questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Yora. Lots of really good information. So we have just about 10 minutes left. I had a few questions to ask the team, and I see a lot of the questions are being answered live in the chat feature, so feel free to keep adding them in there. We'll try to answer them all live, or as I said, get back to you. I just also want to note that I realize, because this is the webinar feature, we can't drop all these links that I referenced earlier into the chat. So just a note to the team that in a follow-up, thank you for attending email, it'd be great if we could include all of the links that have been dropped in there. So with the 10 minutes we have left, I wanted to start. I think the first question would be for Tahina about how the waste haulers determine businesses' waste for billing, and how you're supposed to ensure that the actual waste is aligned under the new commercial waste zone regulations. I know you kind of touched on that a bit earlier, but perhaps you could give a little bit more details so people fully understand.
Sure. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
So there's two ways that businesses are going to be billed. One is called the flat/average billing rate method, which is the one that we touched upon earlier. My co-presenters touched upon, which is the waste survey that is required every carter that decides to charge or agrees with the business to charge the flat or average rate billing method is required to do a waste survey to assess how much garbage and recycling and or organics is being generated by the business in a typical billing period. So that's a requirement. The other way they can bill is by volume or weight. So depending on how much the business generates in each billing period, it would vary by the quantity or volume.
Great. Thank you. You may have something to add for this, but first, just kind of jump to Christina. If a business's district already has rolled out the commercial waste zones and uh, they didn't take the opportunity to align their fees with their actual waste that they're producing. What can they do now to kind of get a handle on how much waste they're actually producing and perhaps even try to renegotiate with their waste hauler so they know what they're producing and what they're paying
Right.
or what they should be paying?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, it's almost the same as if you hadn't rolled out, where it's just super important to try to track your own waste. And the hauler survey is going to be a very similar unit weight audit. They're going to weigh some units. They're going to make a call about what they think your average generation is for each stream. Do it the same thing. I mean, it's so quick. We do this all the time with clients where we show up on a curb with a hand scale and a floor scale, and they weigh bags and containers, and you do that a few nights, and you can get a sense of what your generation is. And it's ideal that you do it, quarterly, so you get those seasonal blips and you take care of that, and you have power of data. And historically, we expect to have these contracts for a year and then they shift, but they can change all the time. You can renegotiate at any point. And part of the nice thing with the commercial waste zones is if you didn't go through this process and the city just assigned you a hauler and that all started, you are really open. They've left it really open for you to go back and renegotiate and put what you want to put in place so that you're not just stuck. They're just making sure you're in compliance. So there's a lot of opportunity to just get back with the hauler. If they're coming to do a survey, have a staff person stand outside with them and be part of that process. So you learn what they do, but also you make sure that everything's included and it's right. A lot of times what we see are things like totes or containers that become the unit, and the hauler has very different weights for those units that they're using on average than what yours actually are. There's no reason the hauler won't use yours if you do the work and work with them.
I
Great. Karina,
also
go ahead.
want to also wanted to add that the CWZ Carter is required to provide the results of the waste survey to
Mhm.
the business. So it should be a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's also why, I mean, it was before this law went into effect, there were other models that were analyzed in detail, which included even a one Carter per zone model, right? But the reason that the final decision was made with the three Carter model is so that there is that competition and so that Carters do have an obligation to provide better rates and service.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that was for the Hospitality Alliance during all of the negotiations and when
Yeah,
this whole program was being planned, having the option for multiple Carters in each zone was something that was really important to us. So we
exactly.
are really happy to see that included in the final version of the rules. So I think there's probably also like a lot of bars and restaurants that are located in areas where the zones have not yet rolled out, and obviously throughout the presentation you provided a lot of good information, but maybe each of you, if you have kind of a best practice for businesses, if they're in a zone where the commercial waste zone has not rolled out, what they can do to kind of get ahead of it. If there's one or two tips you each have, um, or do you have anything?
Yeah, we do have a resource that will also provide as a follow-up to this
Great.
that will support in some of that guidance as well as diversion. I noticed that in the Q&A, someone was asking specifically about like on-site processing
Mm,
of surplus. And we definitely encourage, if you're able to, I mean, I know all of you guys know this working the retail space, but like food is an incredibly valuable input for your business. So the most that you can get out of it, the better. If you're able to do things like processing on site, either through dehydration or through digestion, that is definitely encouraged. I would also just note that some businesses have taken the approach of partnering with food digester companies on site to support in creating a new revenue line for their business. For example, Whole Foods and Amazon is partnering with a dehydrator company called Mill to create large-scale kitchen processors that allow their food scraps and surplus prepped items to be converted into an animal feed base or an aquaculture feed base, allowing them to actually create a new revenue line for their business by leveraging their surplus product that is not suitable for human consumption. So just thinking of alternative ways to try and maximize and get the most out of every single food item coming into your kitchen. We love to encourage things like food donation where you can, and there's also the incentive through the tax credits. The more you're able to divert before it gets to your waste hauler, the more money you will be able to save by diverting it from that end point. So we definitely want to encourage that as much as possible.
Thanks. Christina, a tip?
A tip, you know, you're going to save money if you're properly separating your waste. So I'm going to say that, and I feel like the bad guy on this call, but if you are a covered food business under the organics ban and you are not already separating your organics, get to it, because that's going to save you so much money, and it's probably long overdue, and it has such huge environmental impact. So start with the food. It's your biggest stream. It's your heaviest stream. There's the donations opportunities, use it for staff meals, but then compost the rest and make sure you're properly separating that.
Great. Gina, in 20 seconds or 15 seconds, got a tip?
Yes, I would say for businesses to get ready for it, they should actually go on our website and see exactly what CWZ is about. What are the benefits to the businesses, which Christina and Aura also talked about in great detail, which was awesome. They should not only find out about CWZ, but also what they are required to do and what their rights are under CWZ, so that if a carter is coming to them prematurely of ahead of the 2 month sign up period, saying you have to do this and you have to sign that, and that they are equipped with the information, that they do have choices. There's also the 5 citywide carters that are authorized to service any business that uses a roll-on roll-off container off sidewalk. So just being equipped with information is the most important, and they shouldn't be signing any CWZ contracts before the first day of the sign up period for their zone.
Got it.
Okay.
Great.
Yep.
Again, I'm Andrew Ridgey, and on behalf of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, I want to thank everyone for joining us on our commercial waste zone presentation today. I want to thank Tuhina at the Department of Sanitation, Christina from the Foodprint Group, and Aura at the Mayor's Office of Food Policy. Great ways to learn how to use this program to save money, to help, benefit the environment. Obviously, if you need kind of the rules and regulations of the Department of Sanitation, it's great. I know we've worked with Aura and her team, and I'm glad you mentioned the Chef to Community tax credit, which is something that the Hospitality Alliance has been advocating alongside with our friends over at Rethink Food and other organizations, and we'll keep advocating for it. And like I say to everyone, whether your business, likes, dislikes, or feels otherwise about a certain rule or regulation, feel free to reach out to the Hospitality Alliance. We have these great partners where we can communicate what's working, what's not working, and make sure that public policy is best suited to help support local businesses while accomplishing the broader public policy goals. So thank you everyone for your presentation. It looks like we have answered most of the questions here, but everybody else can follow up. We'll send an email with that information and all the links to provide additional information. And thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.